Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to an episode of Bulldrek. And as you can see, I've kind of changed up things a little bit. I'm in the process of kind of redoing my apartment a little bit, and in the background, let's see, you can see I have a set of shelves set up. Eventually, I'm going to have a pair of shelves set up back there, and I'm going to put all my board games on one set of shelves, and I'm going to put some of my G.I. Joes and plushies and some of the other various toys and odds and ends that I have on the other. And I'll put some posters and stuff up around it, and that'll be my backdrop for my recording from in the future. It's a project that's in the works. It's slow going, primarily because I have one more of those bookshelves to put together. And unfortunately, I can't do that solo. They're too big and awkward, and with my knees not working, I unfortunately need a second pair of hands to help put those together, and so just one of those things. Takes a little time to do. So anyway, so for the time being, you get to deal with the background kind of just be in my apartment. So eventually it'll be all done up differently, and I'll move and be closer to it, and hopefully it'll look a lot better and be more of an interesting backdrop behind me. All right. So anyways, enough of that nonsense. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Bulldrek, where I review things and talk about things and do pretty much whatever I want. This week, I'm going to talk a little bit about Young Justice. Young Justice was an animated series, DC animated series that aired a number of years ago. I want to say 6, 7, 8 years ago, somewhere about that now. And it only aired for 2 seasons. It's currently on Netflix, and I've been watching it on Netflix. And if you haven't seen it, go to Netflix and watch it. It's fantastic if you're any sort of a fan of superheroes. So a little bit of background. As most folks know, I am a pretty big Marvel guy and not really a big DC guy. Always kind of been that way. I grew up reading Marvel comics, and I tried branching out into DC stuff. But DC in the 80s was a little weird. Their stories tended to be, I don't know, they just weren't as interesting to me. They didn't really speak to me as a kid. Not in the way that Marvel did. Especially because I think in the 80s, DC was trying to find their footing and figure out what they wanted to do, because they were coming off of the 70s with a lot of things like Super Friends. You still had people remembering the Adam West Batman as, Batman being like this goofy thing. The movies hadn't come out, the Tim Burton Batman movie hadn't been released yet and all that. The only movies they had at the time was Superman, which was fantastic, but I don't know. I don't think DC really knew what they were doing in the 80s. I think they were still trying to figure out which direction they wanted to go, and some might argue they're still doing that, but I think they found their footing for a while. And the reason I talk about this is because, like I said, I kind of tried off and on over the years to get into DC, and I really couldn't for the most part. There's a few things I followed here and there, but it was never something that I collected hardcore. But then DC did the Death of Superman back in the early 90s. And while it was a big gimmicky event, and, even from the moment they did it, nobody expected Superman to stay dead, I kind of was in a weird phase, because that was right around the time I was in late high school, going to college, and the comic book market kind of went crazy as far as like speculation and prices and stuff like that. So I had a couple of years there where I bought comics based less on whether I was interested in the comics and more on whether I thought they might be worth money sometime in the future. Because, I was a stupid kid. and I bought into all that. But one of the things I got into was the death of Superman. And I actually found it to be a pretty interesting story. I love the idea of these four different characters stepping in to take Superman's place. If you don't know the story, Superman gets killed by Doomsday. And in the wake of that, four characters all claiming to be, well, three characters claiming to be Superman and one character claiming to be Superman's clone all show up and step in to take the name Superman. And there were four Superman comic books that had been running at the time. And each one took one of the characters and they ran on their own stories. Well, one of these characters ended up eventually becoming Superboy. And this isn't the Superboy, the adventures of Clark Kent when he was a kid in Smallville Superboy. This was a character who was a clone of Superboy, of Superman. And he was a lot of fun. I loved the character because unlike a lot of DC's characters at the time, he brought with him like this light-hearted sense of adventure, this sense of fun. He enjoyed being a hero. He enjoyed having superpowers, and he was just there to have fun. And he was this teenage hero, and he reminded me a lot of the reasons why I like Spider-Man. Is, you know, he was the type of superhero who would throw down, but he would also crack jokes and just enjoyed things. And it's telling that when DC and Marvel did their little crossover thing in the 90s, the amalgam, where they merged the universes for a little bit and did a series of one-shot comics with mixed characters, The Amazing Spider-Boy was one of them. That was basically Superboy and Spider-Man merged into one character because they fit so well. So he was a character that I really enjoyed, and he's the one DC comic that I really collected for any length of time. I collected a large portion of the Superboy comic run through the 90s, and I even had the pretty terrible Superboy and the Ravers comic series, which was pretty bad. But it was Superboy, and I loved it. So anyways, Young Justice. In the comics, eventually, Superboy, one of the Kid Flash characters, Impulse, and the young Robin, Tim Drake, formed a team called Young Justice. And I really enjoyed that as well. It was a Peter David written comic, and it was another one that was kind of, it embraced the humor while still telling a really, really good story. And I've always kind of enjoyed the kid hero aspect of comics when you get that. So that was a lot of fun. So anyways, they did Young Justice as a cartoon series, and it wasn't quite the same as the Young Justice comic series. It went off in its own direction and put its own spin on various characters. But it was handled by Greg Weisman, who was the guy who was behind Disney's Gargoyles cartoon, which is also one of my favorite cartoons of all time. Again, if you haven't watched it, run out and find a way to watch it. I don't think it's streaming anywhere right now. It's not Netflix or anything like that. But I think you can find them on disc at this point. But I love that series. It was really well done, really well written. I suggest you go out and check it out. So Young Justice follows Superboy, Aqualad, Robin, Miss Martian, and Kid Flash. And then eventually they bring in another one, Artemis. And there's a lot of other characters involved, and you get a lot of the DC heavy hitters showing up here and there. But it's a really great series about these kids trying to learn, basically trying to find their place in the world, especially because originally the first few characters are sidekicks. Kid Flash, Robin, Aqualad, and they want to step out of the shadow of being sidekicks. In fact, Speedy, who is Green Arrow's sidekick, is like the oldest of the bunch of them. And he originally thinks they're getting invited to join the Justice League, and when they're not, he actually gets all upset and leaves, and that becomes a plot later on. But it's just really fantastic done. It's just, The characters are tightly written. There's a lot of really good emotional and interpersonal relationships between the characters. There's a fantastic meta plot that runs throughout. And they also did some interesting stuff, and I'm kind of curious as to why they ended up doing it this way, because it was an interesting choice, but at the same time it was pretty neat the way they did it, because the first season follows this one big plot all the way through, and it's 20, 25, 26 episodes. So it's a longer season, but it follows the main plot, and it's got the characters going all through, and then at the end they kind of save the day. But it ends up this cliffhanger for second season. And I won't go into it as to what the cliffhanger is and stuff, because I don't want to spoil things. Like I said, go watch this series. Run, don't walk. But it was kind of interesting because second season actually has this 5-year time jump. So they wrapped up the main plots for first season, and then in second season they jump forward 5 years. So a lot of the characters are suddenly in different places. A few of the characters have joined the Justice League at this point. Some of them have gone their separate ways and stuff. And it gave them a lot of wiggle room to bring in a bunch of new characters, some of which had been hinted at or had made cameos as non-powered versions of their character in first season. But it opened it up to bring in a lot more of the kid heroes and stuff, and even some of the more experienced heroes and such into the second season. So it was an interesting way to handle that, but then it's got this whole other meta plot that runs throughout the season as well. And again, it's fantastic and so much fun. I honestly had forgotten how much. I mean, I knew I enjoyed the series. I remember liking it, but sitting down and watching it again, it's even better than I remember it. And I think that's very high praise for me, because a lot of times I'll remember liking something, but then I'll sit down and watch it, and I'm like, this was fun, but not as good as I remember it. My nostalgia buttons tend to override my actual memories sometimes. But no, this is, I think, in many ways was better than I remembered, because it's just, like I said, it's just so well done. It's so much fun. And again, Superboy is a fantastic character. He's not the same character that I grew up, that I read when I was younger. Because in this one, he's a clone, again. But in this one, they didn't do the death of Superman. So instead, he was a clone being grown by Project Cadmus as a weapon. And he gets rescued by the kids. But when he gets rescued, he basically has almost no personality. He has a bunch of memories that were basically force-fed into him. Knowledge and stuff like that, but he doesn't really know anything. So his character is a little more serious and a little more straightforward. Has some anger management issues, which I can, totally empathize with. But overall, it was just he's still really well done, and he's still Superboy. So I think they did a great job with it. I've never been a big Robin fan. I mean, the Dick Grayson Robin. Probably just because I never really read comics with him as Robin in them. By the time I was really reading comics, he had already graduated to Nightwing. And it was kind of interesting because the Robin they use in this is Dick Grayson. But he's really very fun-loving. It's kind of interesting because he's really this weird jokester character. He has a thing where he talks about, like in the very first episode, he talks about somebody uses the phrase, "Oh, it's very underwhelming," and somebody says, "Well, we're getting overwhelmed," and he makes the joke that, people are always overwhelmed or underwhelmed, but why isn't anybody ever just whelmed? And that's sort of one of his running things where he plays around with wordplay like that a lot of times. He also has this thing where he'll just giggle. He'll be running off and he'll be doing things, and he just does this weird, creepy kid laugh in the background, and it's weird and disconcerting, but it really makes the character stand out. And just general, all the characters are just really well done. So, 2 thumbs up for the series. Like I said, if you haven't watched it, go watch it, enjoy it. If you like comics at all, If you like DC at all, even if you don't like DC, frankly, I think you'll enjoy the series because it's just, like I said, it's just really solid. They really tackle a lot of interesting, interesting things. They handle it in a fairly mature way, without going dark or without going too gritty or grim or anything like that. And don't get me wrong, the show goes serious and even a little dark in a couple of places every now and then, for story purposes. But for the most part, the story's pretty straightforward, pretty lighthearted. But it's taken seriously. It's a very straightforward, very serious approach to superheroes and kid superheroes, and it's just a lot of fun. So yeah, check that out and enjoy it. All right, well that's going to be it for me this week. I just wanted to kind of do a quick review of Young Justice, like I said, and give you guys my opinion. Like I said, great fun. Go watch it. All right, so that's going to be it for me. Once again, as always, thank you to my Patreon backers. You guys are the ones that make this possible. If you're interested in checking out my Patreon and helping me to do more of these videos or to check out some of my creative writing efforts and stuff that I make available exclusively to my Patreon backers, check out the link in the description below. Like the video, subscribe to my channel, all that nonsense. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and have a good one.